On Christmas Eve, 1945, a house fire destroyed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. 9-year-old Martha, 8-year-old Jennie, 5-year-old Betty, Maurice, 14, and Louis, 9, were never seen again. But here's the thing that has haunted investigators for nearly 80 years. When the ashes were sifted, not a single bone was ever found. No teeth. No fragments. No remains of any kind. 5 children gone without a trace from a fire that burned at temperatures far too low to incinerate a human body. So what really happened that night? George Sodder was an Italian immigrant, born Giorgio Soddu in Sardinia. He came to America in the early 1900s and eventually settled in Fayetteville, a small town nestled in the Appalachian Hills of West Virginia. He married Jennie Cipriani, and together they built a life, a trucking business, a comfortable home on a hillside, and a large, loving family. 10 children in all. By 1945, the Sodders were a well-known family in town, respected but not without enemies. See, George was outspoken. He openly criticized Mussolini's fascist regime at a time when doing so could earn you threats even in America. And it did. In the months before the fire, a life insurance salesman visited the Sodder home and, after George refused to buy a policy, reportedly said, and I quote, "Your house is going to go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." Another stranger was spotted near their property on multiple occasions, watching the house. A local man would later claim he was hired to attach a device to the Sodder phone line. These weren't the only warnings. But what happened on Christmas Eve made them all suddenly, terrifyingly relevant. But before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand one thing: the details of this case don't add up. Not then. Not now. And the deeper you look, the worse it gets. Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sodder family goes about their holiday evening. The children play, some ask to stay up late, and eventually, the household begins to settle in. Jennie Sodder falls asleep on the couch around 1 in the morning. At approximately 1:30 a.m., the phone rings. Jennie answers. A woman's voice on the other end asks for someone Jennie doesn't recognize, then laughs and hangs up. Jennie notices the lights are still on upstairs and the curtains are open. She goes back to sleep. 30 minutes later, she's woken again, this time by a loud bang on the roof. Then, within minutes, the smell of smoke. The downstairs is already filling with flames. George and Jennie scramble. They manage to get 4 of their 10 children out, the ones sleeping on the ground floor. But the staircase to the second floor is engulfed. George tries to get up the stairs. He can't. He runs outside. His ladder, which always leaned against the house, is gone. Vanished. He tries to use his coal truck to reach the second floor window. The truck won't start. It had worked perfectly the day before. He tries a water barrel, it's frozen solid, in a winter that neighbors said was unusually mild. Let that sink in. Every single method of rescue systematically eliminated. George calls the fire department. They don't arrive until 8 a.m., nearly 7 hours later. The chief later claimed he didn't receive the call, though Fayetteville's fire station was just 2.5 miles away. By the time they arrived, the house had been reduced to a smoldering basement. Now here's where it gets strange. The local fire chief ruled the cause of the fire as faulty wiring. But a telephone repair man had inspected the house shortly before and cleared the wiring. The fire chief also declared all 5 children dead in the fire. But when George asked about remains, bones, teeth, anything, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Let me give you a number to hold on to. A standard house fire burns at roughly 1,100 to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. A crematorium operates between 1,400 and 1,800 degrees, and even then, bone fragments and teeth survive. The Sodder house was a modest wooden structure. It burned for approximately 45 minutes before collapsing. There is no realistic scenario in which 5 human bodies, including a 14-year-old, would leave zero trace. The state fire marshal's office agreed. Their investigator, in a quiet assessment, noted that the absence of remains was deeply inconsistent with the fire chief's conclusion. But officially? Nothing changed. George and Jennie didn't accept it. They hired a private investigator. They put up a billboard along Route 16 with photos of the 5 missing children. That billboard stayed up for decades. Jennie maintained it until her death in 1989. And then there were the sightings. In 1947, a woman in a hotel in Charleston, South Carolina told hotel staff she had 4 of the Sodder children with her. When a hotel employee tried to intervene, the woman left quickly with the children and was never found. In 1952, a witness saw a woman matching a description in a diner with children who resembled the Sodder kids. In 1967, Jennie received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man who looked remarkably like her son Louis. On the back, handwritten, were the words, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Ill boys." A 90132 or 35. The numbers remain unexplained to this day. Jennie hired another private investigator to trace the envelope. He traveled to the postmark location, Central Station, Kentucky. He checked in, contacted the family to say he had leads, and then vanished. He was never heard from again. What would you have done? Imagine spending 20, 30, 40 years searching for your children, finding fragments of hope that dissolve every single time. In 1949, George excavated the basement himself. He found a few small bones and some vertebrae. He sent them to the Smithsonian Institution for analysis. The response was devastating, but not in the way you'd expect. The Smithsonian determined that the bones were likely from someone in their late teens or early 20s, not from children aged 5 through 14. And more critically, they found that the bones had never been exposed to fire of the intensity described. The implication was staggering: someone may have planted remains in the basement. So what are we left with? A fire with no verified cause. 5 children with no remains. A ladder that vanished. A truck that wouldn't start. A fire department that didn't come. A phone call from a stranger. Witnesses who saw the children alive afterward. A photograph that arrived 22 years later. And an investigator who disappeared. Does that sound like a house fire to you? Multiple theories have circulated for decades. Some believe the children were kidnapped, possibly taken by members of the Italian mafia or a connected organization as retaliation for George's political outspokenness. Others suggest the children were sold or trafficked, a horrifying but not historically unprecedented crime in mid-century Appalachia. A smaller number believe the fire was genuinely accidental and the remains simply were never properly recovered, though this theory struggles to explain the missing ladder, the dead truck, and the delayed fire response. The town of Fayetteville largely moved on. But the Sodder family never did. George died in 1969, still searching. Jennie kept the billboard lit until she passed in 1989. Their surviving children continued the search into the 2000s. In 2021, some of the surviving Sodder descendants attempted to get the case reopened. As of today, no new official investigation has been launched. 5 children. Christmas Eve. A fire that consumed a house but apparently left no trace of the people inside it. Were they taken? Are their descendants alive today who don't know their real family name? Or did they perish that night in a way that science simply cannot reconcile? The billboard is gone now. But the question it asked still hangs in the air, unanswered after nearly 80 years. The Sodder children case remains one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries in American history. If you have a theory, or if you've come across information that the rest of us haven't, drop it in the comments. And if this case kept you up at night the way it kept Jennie Sodder awake for 44 years, subscribe to Obscura Files, because the stories we tell here are the ones that never got their ending. I'll see you in the next one.